All right, and we're up. I'll shut this window so I don't hear myself. And I found our window. Okay. Hey, everybody. All right, welcome to GenX Journeys. I'm Paul Stressner. And see, I usually start off with GenX Journeys with something I'm grateful for. And it's still this week, like I had mentioned that I signed up for a marathon in case you didn't know, and it's going to be my second marathon. I didn't think I'd do one again, but I got the itch, so I'm at it again. So I'm doing the Clarence DeMar Marathon in New Hampshire on September 27th, and I've done three training runs so far, and it's going really great. And so I'm grateful for that. And I had a really good workout in the gym this morning. So I'm, splitting everything up. So kind of keeping everything level. So I'll mix my running with my weight training and try to improve on last year. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really feeling good. And also with connecting with the running community, the TikTok seems to be putting me in that algorithm now. So that's a lot of fun being inspired there. So yep, having a lot of fun with that. So that's mine today, and this is going to be a great, powerful episode of Gen X Journey. So, a lot of us think of our toughest chapters come later in life, but what if they hit you at wall at once before you even get started? Today's guest, Devin Fish, grew up moving from place to place, never really having stability. And at 18, just before heading into the army, he experienced a moment that would change everything. And that was only the beginning. And over the next few years, he faced loss, identity struggles, online scams, and turned into blackmail, and moments where he seriously questioned whether he wanted to keep going. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. Devin turned those experiences into purpose, serving others in the military, speaking openly about mental health, and writing a book that challenged people to face the hardest questions in their own lives. So, this episode is about resilience, truth, and what it really takes to build when life knocks you down early. So, welcome to the episode, Devin Fish.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Um, and before we get into your story, I ask every guest, what are you grateful for today?
Today I'm grateful, to start, just to get another day. And, I always love the opportunity to get out, tell the story, and then help start spreading awareness.
Um, so let's see. There's I guess what we could start from the beginning, and you can take us back to what did life look like for you growing up? It definitely wasn't boring.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, my name is Devin Fish. I am 28 years old. I'm not 18. A lot of people get that mistaken when they meet me. I normally have to start off with that with the conversation. Even in my army career, like they look at my rank, they look at me, they're like, "How old are you?" And I get that from like a brand new private. They're like, "Something's not adding up here." Um, but where it started, I was born and raised in Rockford, Illinois. I was there for the first 18 years of my life. To give people an estimate of what Rockford, Illinois is like. So on the crime index, we are rated 5 out of 100, meaning 95% of the United States is safer than us. So I wasn't born in a great place. During that time, before I joined the military, I moved about 16 times. And so my life was pretty unstable. We were pretty poor most of those times. So like living conditions. So I've lived in everything from like a house, apartment, trailer, farm, all the way down to like a motel. I've lived with my mother, father, two different aunts, grandparents, couple friends of my mother's. Living conditions weren't always great. Sometimes we didn't have AC. Sometimes we didn't have like hot water. There's a time where we didn't have a bathroom. I knew we were poor pretty early on in life. When I compared myself to my friends, for instance, like I had a flip phone and a CD player. My friends like had iPods and iPhones, so I was like two generations behind them all the time. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of my background. And then, yeah, once I started at 18 years old, that's where the story really starts to ramp up. Um, so I was 18, yeah, getting ready to join the military. I was about a month away from going to basic training, and then I was about a month away from graduating high school. Came home one day. I was living with my father in an apartment. As soon as I got off the bus, I noticed our apartment was swarmed with police vehicles. So there's about 10 police vehicles around our apartment. There's like glass on the concrete, stuff like that, and there's like a busted AC vent in the lawn. Based on my early start in life, I kind of early put it in my head, even though it's an apartment complex of 20 or 30, I'm like, well, I'm not going to have a very good day, am I? So I walked up to the police, and they're like, "Yep, can't let you go in that apartment. We don't want you to know what's going on, and we can't have you witnessing anything right now." So they had to escort me off the premises. They had to take me to my aunt's, which was about 2 miles down the road. From there, they told my aunt a little bit of what happened. So we got the news that he resisted arrest. So they had to tase him, sedate him, and then they had to take him to the hospital. They didn't go into too much detail apart from that. So then we headed to the hospital to see what his condition was. We get to the hospital. He is handcuffed to a bedpost, and then his arms are covered in scratches and blood and stuff like that.
Hmm.
He had just resisted arrest, so he was pretty hyped up still. He didn't really want to see us there, especially when he saw me. He's trying to turn away, pretty ashamed of his actions, stuff like that. And then the people there tell us the situation even more. So essentially, what happened and why he was still all hyped up was that he took Fireball whiskey and then combined it with cocaine. So pretty much, he's like super hyped up, and he pretty much exploded in that apartment.
So it
Um,
was like a little more than being tased and
yeah,
city.
yeah.
There's a
So
lot more went on there. Yeah.
yeah, so that was why he resisted. Got
Hmm.
tased. Probably had to have multiple cops take him down, stuff like that, and that's why they had to give him a sedative and keep him
Hmm.
handcuffed because he was still not in the mood.
With
Like
all that
even
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, so
Hmm.
even like a couple days after this incident, he was still on edge. So
Hmm.
that gave you an idea of like how long it lasted.
Hmm.
Um, and then at this time, I still had to go to school. I think it was a Friday, and I had to go to school Monday, so I had to go get my belongings from the apartment. So we go back to the apartment. We open the door, and the first thing my aunt says, like, if we didn't know he was alive and we didn't see him in the hospital, we thought he would have been murdered. That's how bad the scene was.
Wow.
So we get in that apartment, and everything is covered in blood. So like the floors, the walls, the ceilings, like everything. And like when I say exploded in that apartment, like everything was broken. We had like a glass table that was broken, furniture, refrigerators, cabinets, TVs, and then even our AC unit, which was like hooked into the wall, got thrown like through the window. So that tells you how explosive that scene was.
Wow.
And that's really the first story. And then on top of that, I still had to graduate high school. I wasn't doing great in high school at this point. I was already missing like 50 assignments, so I didn't need like the additional stress.
Hmm.
And then after that, I had to boot camp, which was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, about a month or two after that. So it's like one stressful situation after another. And then, once I get to Leonard Wood, it doesn't get any easier.
Hmm.
Um,
Um, yeah, before we go on, did with your dad in that condition, did it like change how you saw your future? Did you how did it make you feel? Like, did you make it a point not to be like that, or how did you feel?
well, I'm happy to report I don't do like any alcohol and I don't do like any cigarettes, any drugs or anything like that. So that was one thing that helped me. Like
Mm,
even, yeah, I think I tried alcohol like a couple times in my life, but I always kind of like thought about that situation. It's like, okay, because it wasn't just my dad,
mhm,
his dad had an issue as well. So they were both like had alcohol issues. So it was kind of like a family thing. And I kind of like noticed that right away. And like even when I drank a couple times after that, I was like, okay, I see my tolerance. I can see where this is going. Let me go ahead and stop this.
mhm.
Luckily, I never liked the taste of alcohol, so that helped me stay away.
Yeah,
But I kind of, saw that event and the military was kind of like my opportunity to get away from it for a while.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that does help me when it comes to trying not to get addicted to like any substance abuse or stuff like that. So that did form quite a bit.
Hmm. Yeah. And do you think maybe the um kind of growing up with that instability, moving constantly, beyond your control, do you think that maybe that had one of the reasons why you decided to go in the military? You get more structure, do you think?
Coincidentally, my father was the one that actually recommended me go to the military.
Hmm.
So like I said earlier, I was missing about 50 assignments in school. The previous year, I failed out one of my classes. And my dad kind of like recognized that I was on a similar path to him. And I think that's one of the things that he was always kind of stressed about and what kind of like led to the drugs and like the alcohol because a lot of things were going on in his life.
Hmm.
And so I think the more he saw me like get towards like his path, he's like, for like a year straight, he was pretty much on me the entire year. He's like, you're not doing these classes, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. And it was like a constant reminder to the point where during the summer, he's like, you're going to go get a job. It's non-optional and you're going to go pay off your class.
Hmm.
So I was still pretty rebellious at this time. And what ended up happening, I would take a picture of the resume, show him like, hey, I'm doing all these resumes. And then I would throw them in the trash to be, he didn't know about this. And, until he probably starts watching some of the podcasts I've been doing. Um, so yeah, it's a nice little thing for him to find out. Um, but he got so fed up because it was at the end of the summer. I still didn't have a job. And he's like, he probably figured out that I was lying. He just couldn't
Hmm.
find it. So he's like, have you ever thought about the military? I was like, sure, just to get him off my back. He's like, and essentially he called my bluff. He's like, all right, got the keys. We went down to the Army recruiter's office. I ended up liking what they said. Plus, at the same time, it got me off my father's back, calmed him down a little bit.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I actually do have to credit my dad for actually getting me into the military.
Hmm.
It's something he wanted to do when he was younger. He's like, it probably would have straightened him out a little bit more. Um, but yeah, so even though my dad, did some messed up things in my childhood and stuff like that, he never like hated me or anything like that. He made a couple really bad decisions.
Yeah.
But eventually it ended up helping me, kind of see it, and kind of see everything I was like growing up around. I'm like, okay, it took me a couple years as we'll get to knowing the story, but eventually it helped me turn my life around.
Yeah. 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 That's great. Yeah. I mean, that just shows that yeah, it's really a disease, and yeah, that's good that he had the awareness and to still parent you and get you in the right direction. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, so you ended up joining the army. You want to say what happened?
Yeah, so I ended up joining as a 68 Charlie, which is a nurse for people who don't know, or an LPN. Um, so I went to Fort Leonard Wood for my basic training. Halfway through the cycle, found out that I'm not very good at shooting rifles. Failed by one shot. And so what happens
Wow.
when you fail is like you have to restart everything over. So I had to go through my second basic training cycle. Um, didn't fail my rifle marksmanship after that. So I just went across the street, was a couple weeks behind. So I just had to do all the training over. And then I ended up passing the second time through. So that was good.
Hmm.
Then I went to Fort Sam Houston to go to the nursing school. Got there, found out that the dropout rate for being a nurse in the Army is 70%. So no one ever
Wow.
told me that part.
Wow.
So about 5 weeks into that course, I ended up failing out. Um, at that time, I was also going through some other things. So personally and mentally, I couldn't keep up with it. And then from there, I kind of had to sit around until the Army gave me my next assignment. So just because you fail out of training doesn't mean, the Army's going to terminate your contract. Well, now because you failed, now they're going to choose a job for you.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
so I was presented essentially with two options. They're like, hey, you can be a cook or you can be a scout. So it's like, I'll go try to figure out what a scout is being like, which is kind of the opposite of being a nurse. Um,
Right.
so while I was waiting for that class, I was sitting like on a bench for like 2 to 3 months, and this is like winter. this is like fall winter time frame, so it's just like, shaking on a bench constantly waiting for the next assignment. It's
Hmm.
not, a great experience because you're still in that, trade-off position.
Yeah.
And then I found out to be a scout, their training and their basic training are linked together. So then they shipped me over to basic training at Fort Benning. So I had to go back to basic training for the third time. And
What was
so,
it very similar? Was it the same
um,
thing pretty much at the beginning?
so it is similar, but I noticed like every time I went to like a new basic training cycle, somewhere along the lines it got beefed up because it's going to be different from like, getting placed with like miscellaneous MOSs, and then you're going to like a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout, which is considered a combat MOS.
Hmm.
So their mindset's completely different. They're more strict. Experience wasn't great. They like to toss our lockers for no reason, keep us on our toes. Do essentially they like to make your life as miserable as they
That's what
can
the
as long as
yeah.
you're there. And
Yeah.
you think it gets easier, but no, they just get stricter as it goes.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was pretty much stuck in the basic training environment for about a year.
Wow.
So like even when I got out of my instability with like my family life, I hopped in the military and I'm already hopping around like 4 times within a year, failing before, my military career even started.
Hmm.
Ended up passing 19 Delta school, got my certificate, and then I headed over to Fort Hood, Texas, which is where the second story begins.
Hmm.
Um, So I was there, got a phone call from my mother. To give a little background on my mother, she was in similar situations to where she kind of had drug and alcohol addictions when I was growing up as well. Right when I was around a teenager and the stuff with my dad was going on, they were never together. They were always like separate. But her thing was like pain medication. And so she would like buy it, sell it, trade it. And I recently found out it was like also heroin as well. So she was also into some hard drugs.
Hmm.
And then I I was at this age, I could kind of recognize it as well that something was going on. I wasn't just completely oblivious to what she was doing. And for people who haven't like seen people in those kind of situations, like what pain medication actually does, it kind of like zombifies the person to where their like body's there, but their like mind is completely gone. I was having a conversation with my mother like mid sentence. Um, and she's standing up and her head just starts bobbing and she pretty much falls asleep while she's standing up because of the effects of these like medications and stuff like that. And this was like, before I shipped off to basic training. While I was in basic training, she had actually got off her addictions. And she was actually doing really well. She got like a job, a car, she was at a new place, stuff like that. And then so I get a phone call from her. It was nothing extreme. She just wanted to check to see how I was doing, see how my new unit was. And then she also, I believe she wished me like a happy birthday because it was about 2 weeks before my birthday.
Hmm. Wow.
So we say our goodbyes, say love you. And then the story starts to transition. So next day, I ended up finding out it was going to be the last time I was going to get to talk to my mother. So I got a Red Cross message and they said, "Hey, you got to come back home. Your mother's not in good condition." I'm also her eldest son. So a couple things happen once I get to that hospital. They tell me what's going on. So essentially, what happened? The medication had a bad reaction to her brain, and it fried it from like the inside out.
Wow.
And so I had to kind of make the decision as the eldest son. They're like, "Hey, whether we keep her on life support or let her go is going to be on you." And so that's like my first thing
That's
that happens when I get to the hospital.
wow.
For religious reasons, I ended up letting her go. But as I was making that decision, the nurse walked in. They're like, "Hey, we're going to have to let her go." So my first experience with the military, heading to my first unit, I had to sit there and watch my mother die, and then go back to my unit. And so at this point, nothing's really working in life. But yeah, that's where the second story ends there.
Wow. Yeah. So that must have really affected you with how you already have like all this instability. And then you're like, transition in the army, and then get hit with that. Um, Yeah, most people would have quit by that. What kept you going, do you think? Just you just going through it. How long did you have time, a certain amount of time after she passed that they gave you?
Yeah, I think when I initially went on, I don't remember all of it because this was like 6, 7 years ago by now.
Hmm.
Um, well, actually, like 8 years, I think now. But when the first hospital trip happened, I was able to go, and then I think there was a break, and then I went back for the actual funeral and stuff like that. So I did get time to go back. So I didn't get denied or anything like that.
Hmm.
So that was like the only kind of good part about it. Um, One of the issues I ended up having though was like I was having some like debit card issues. I think I lost my debit card or something like that with like one of my banks.
Oh.
And so I had to get back there with like no money. So there was like other stresses like that. I would say like the only thing that kept me going was that I tried not to actual focus on the death. It's death hasn't always like affected me so much. And then so when I went back to the army, I didn't really say anything and no one really knew about it except the people who put me on leave. And then I just kind of like used the army to distract me with my work and stuff like that and then kind of push the feelings off. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, how did that work? Were you able to function fine?
Yeah, so I was able
Yeah.
to function fine. So once I got back from the funeral and stuff like that, my actual, well, so at Fort Hood, Texas, my actual unit was in Korea. So I ended up going joining with them. That experience wasn't too bad. I actually like Korea, and then it was kind of where everyone was pretty close together. So that aspect wasn't so bad.
That's cool.
Um, Once I got back from Korea, we went on like a little detail at Fort Knox called the Cadet Summer Training Program. Absolutely hated that detail. Um, and then we fast forwarded. So I get back from, I think I was in Korea for like 4 or 5 months. Get back to go to Knox. That was like a 2 month detail. And then once I get back from Knox, that's kind of when my part of the story starts taking place of where my issues came from.
Hmm.
So I was, I think, 21 or 22 at the time. And then by this time, like nothing in life is going well. So that's when everything starts going around in my head. From like an early age, I didn't really care, which is why I was failing my classes in high school, stuff like that. I think I hit like depression to where I was pretty lonely at the time. And then that ended up turning into like self hatred because I'm like, okay, it's not the army, it's not the parents, it's not just, the school system. At this point, it's like maybe it's just me. So I
Wherever you
developed a
go,
lot
there
of
you
self
are.
hatred. Yeah. So I'm like, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's not happening to everyone else. I'm just the bad luck guy around here.
Mm.
And so I start because I didn't really have love for myself. I start looking for it in other people, and which is where my troubles began. Because I didn't find any genuine people. I went on to all the dating sites, and the only people I found were like people who were like catfishing, scamming, which ended up leading to like the blackmail in my story, to where I get blackmailed probably on several times throughout the year. My bank accounts were zeroed out multiple times that year. My problem was that I didn't care. At this point, I would give them the money. I knew when I was getting blackmailed, I learned the system and I would just let it happen. So it didn't matter what they wanted. If they wanted money, I'd give them the money. If they wanted attention, I gave them attention. If they wanted pictures, I'd give them pictures.
Hmm.
Um, and so I got into that cycle very bad. Um, and then so I guess I can break some of those situations down. So like the first one, because it wasn't just all at once, it was like a progressive thing over the year.
Hmm.
So like the first one was a more of a catfish. They never blackmailed me, anything like that, but they wanted attention and they're like, "Hey, I want to come see you. Send me some money." Cool. Sent them the money. They never showed up. Same situation, different story every time. They would never show up. It even got to a dangerous place to where even one time I was like, "Okay, if you're not going to show up, then I'm going to show up." So I ended up going to the town they said they were in, and then they still wouldn't show up. They still came up with excuses, and thankfully they did, because I realize how stupid that is right now.
Right.
That I probably could have got kidnapped, stuff like that, for
Right.
money
Yeah.
and
Could have been
everything
a
like
bunch of
that.
people. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
one that one was really bad now that I look back on it. And
Hmm.
then once I got done with one person, I would just go on to the next person. And then
Hmm.
it was the same thing with the dating websites. So it started off with like Tinder, and these dating websites are extraordinarily predatory, especially for like the male population and stuff like that.
Oh,
But
definitely.
like you go, yeah,
Yeah, I should also point out like a lot of us Gen Xers maybe have gotten divorced and then getting back in the dating game. And so this online dating wasn't around when we were younger. So yeah, so I hope people can take precautions from this if they're, trying that. But yeah, it is predatory. Yeah.
yeah. I would highly recommend people just stay away from it. I
Mm.
was even watching a video the other day to where someone did an experiment. Um, they swapped their gingers to show that they were female. They ended up getting like 1,000 matches, but when they went to the male side, they got like one. And so that kind
Wow.
of tells you that it's like set up to where it's like female dominant to where they'll get the matches, and then so the guys are kind of just left hanging, and that's when the scammers come in. They're the only ones that will respond half the time,
Right.
um,
That makes
and
sense.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so
Hmm.
like for me, like I was swiping every day, and once you're done with the swiping, they're like, hey, do you want to purchase the premium, and you can keep swiping all day. And so I did that, and then when that one didn't happen, I went to the next one and the next one and the next one, and like
Hmm.
I went to all the websites. So I went to everything from like popular to the obscure. I even went to like the ones rated 1 star. They're like, hey, this is all bot scammers. I'm like, all right, cool. At least
Wow.
someone will talk to me.
Uh-huh.
I even started going on like the adult websites that give you like a virus the first time you click on it.
Hmm.
It got to that bad to where I was like so desperate to find something and I could never find it. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of where it starts progressing. So the next scammer I found, so it was just normal conversation. They would occasionally ask me for money. We ended up sending some pictures to each other. They didn't do anything about it, but when I stopped giving them their money, I'm like, hey, I have pictures of you. I'm going to start spreading this on the internet. And so that was the first time I was actually blackmailed.
Hmm.
Um, Eventually, they stopped asking for money. I think they came back a couple years later, um, but they stopped for a little while. And then once they stopped, I'm like, cool, I'm not getting blackmailed anymore. Let me go try this again. So did it again. The next one got beefed up a little more. So what happened? Uh, they sent some pictures. I sent some pictures, and as soon as I sent the pictures, they showed me a Facebook profile of my family. So they found my profile, and within 30 seconds, they're like, "Hey, send us money. We got all your information." And so that was within like 30 seconds of the conversation.
Wow. Wow.
And so that was a vicious one. That was a really
Hmm.
bad one. And I ended up getting out of that situation. And I actually kept my profile private for like years. I just made it public when I wrote the book because I'm actively speaking about these things now. And so
Hmm.
I'm like, I can't keep this in private anymore. Um, where was I? It was that one. So yeah, I ended up the first scammer that blackmailed me actually helped me get out of that second scam. They're like, hey, block the number, delete your Facebook profile. If you don't give them the money, they just leave you alone from that point. So that
Uh-huh.
ended up working.
Oh, wow.
Of
Yeah.
course, but that person still wanted money, so I
Right.
wasn't out of
Yeah.
the woods. Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
and so, and then it kind of, the scamming stops a little while after that. And then I get to one of the situations where it's one of the more explicit parts of the book, to where I actually find someone, but again, they want money. So the best way I could say is that they were pretty much like an online prostitute at this point. And so
Hmm.
they're like, hey, come over, give me money, do whatever you want. And at this point, I've got blackmailed and I don't have any matches. No one really cares about me. I feel alone and desperate. So I'm like, cool, I'll just go over there. So I ended up doing that. And then not the proudest moment. Definitely was probably one of the parts of the book I didn't really want to write, but I wanted to make the
Hmm.
book vulnerable enough to let people know that this was like a real situation. And it was actually a pretty big deal because at the time, that's how I ended up losing my virginity. And then, so that was also like a pretty desperate move. And then the next day, well, no, it was probably about a week later, um, I started having to go to the bathroom really bad. So I woke up like one morning, had to go to the bathroom. Everything was like burning. So I went to the bathroom, got back 5 minutes later, I was back in the bathroom, and this happened. I had to go to the bathroom about 5 times. It's kind of one of those sensations
Wow.
to where, like, you're going to the bathroom, but it feels like you have to keep going, so it starts burning. I don't know if you've
Hmm.
ever had, one of those situations. And then I go to head to work. I get to work, and same thing happens. I have to go to the bathroom again. Um, and then one of my section leaders was just like joking around. He's like, "Who you been messing with?" And you're like, "Maybe." And so,
Uh-huh.
and that's when he put it in my head. I'm like, "Okay, maybe I do have something wrong." Obviously, I didn't say anything to him at the time.
Right.
I
Hmm.
just played it off, and I was like, maybe it's like a kidney stone or something like that. So then I go to the bathroom for about the 10th time that day. And at this point, I'm falling to my knees within like pain of going to the bathroom. And so I go to the bathroom, but this time it's not urine that comes out, it's blood and it's like
Blood.
mucus. So
Oh
it's like a
wow.
very nasty thing. And then so I go to the hospital across the street to get it checked out. A day later, they're like, hey, you have chlamydia. You have like an STD.
Wow.
Um, Luckily, it was curable at the time. Um, but yeah, that's,
Yeah.
and
Was that kind of like the lowest point for you?
so that was probably the one I'm least proud of, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to write in the book. But again, I wanted to be completely honest with people and show that it progresses over time and how bad it can actually get. It was actually the next situation that broke me. So at this point, I delete that person's number and I go back into the dating websites again. So get another match, whatever it was. We start talking, and at this point, they swap their ages in the conversation. They're like, "Hey, I'm 17," and then they send like an explicit picture after that. And so I'm like, I don't care. I've already been blackmailed several times at this point. I could sense it like a mile away, and I'm like, cool. I'll just send them something back. And so next day, they're like, "Hey, this person's in the hospital. We know you're in the military. Either you can pay us, or we'll report you to the police and everything like that." Um, and so it was kind of that situation. That's the one that really broke me. And for the next probably couple weeks, I was highly considered like taking my life. Um, and that was kind of like a spiraling thought day by day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the situation that really broke me, because it wasn't just me. It was like, okay, I could go to jail, I can go to prison, I could be labeled a child predator, I can get kicked out of the army. Not a good look like for family wise either. So it's like that was like the ultimate one that set me over the edge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what made you overcome that? You went and talked to somebody.
So this was kind of like a day by day thing. I kind of played it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I originally was giving them the money, and that was, I think, the only reason why I didn't take my life at the moment, because they decided not to report it.
Oh.
So I continued to pay him the money, and then around the same time, I was also sneaking off to a in-flight counselor, which is a military family and life counselor, and I would go to vent. I never told him about the blackmail, never told him about my financial issues, my instability, the issues with my parents. I just told him, I'm like, hey, I hate the army. I don't like working with these people. And so I was still like, disguising my story, because I'm like, even if I told them all of this, I'm like, maybe I thought at the time like maybe they wouldn't even know what to do with this story, and
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of kept it to myself. And then about probably the fifth meeting, I'm like, hey, I've been considering, ending my life. I've been thinking about it. Um, and for those counselors, that's like the only thing they can respond to or they can react to if you want to hurt yourself or someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I used that to put myself in the hospital, and that was, when I accepted I needed to get help and out of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then yeah, so things start turning out better for you after that. But
Um,
how was that program or
yeah. So when I went to the hospital trip itself wasn't too bad. It's not as bad as people actually think it was. It was actually a nice little break away from the army,
Mhm.
and to get my emotions back in check, stuff like that. But two things that kind of like helped me turn my life around were a part of the pamphlets I read. The first one was said that there's a lot of suicidal people who don't want to end their life, and that really resonated with me, because I didn't really necessarily want to end my life. It's just like I didn't see an end to my situation or how to get out of it. because I
Mm-hmm.
just went from one situation to the next. Um, and so that one helped me. And then the second part was the other pamphlet said that you can have a perfectly healthy mind. Um, but if you say that you're depressed, then your mind will slowly start to make you depressed. And so I took that, I reversed it. I'm like, okay, I know I'm messed up in the head right now. I hate myself. That was very clear. And I was like, okay, but what if I could convince myself I could be happy again?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm like, if I can make myself depressed, then I can make myself happy. Um, and I really pursued that for about 2 to 3 years. Um, and then I guess I'll rewind a little bit. So there was two concepts that I forgot before the hospital and why I decided not to end my life because I was contemplating it for a while. The first was that I wanted to live before I died because I kind of reflect on my life. I'm like, this isn't life, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is just terrible. So I'm like,
Yeah.
can it get any worse than this? And I was like, I don't think so. And so that was kind of, so I kind of had to make that decision before I went to the hospital. I'm like, do I want to die? And ultimately I said no. And I think it's one of the questions I asked the audience early on in their book. It's like, why do you want to live or why do you want to die? It's a controversial question, but the problem with not answering that question is like you might be in a situation one day to where it's like your life gets so bad that it comes down to like life or death, and you really don't want to be in that position because you're probably going to lead towards the death at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, um, I got out of the hospital with those two pamphlet ideas. And then one of the things I knew that I didn't like to do, I didn't like being a 19th Delta or Cavalry Scout at the time. So I went to go look at other jobs in the Army. Went to my career counselor, didn't know what a career counselor was at the time. So for people who don't know, those are retention. So they pretty much do the contracts for the soldiers. They help them with like their reclassing. They help with like PCSing. We do their reenlistment contracts, their reenlistment bonuses, stuff like that. So we're kind of like the advocates for people staying in the Army and helping them with their Army career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I started looking at jobs and I'm like, talking to him. I'm like, well, what's your job? And so he just gave me that little short rundown. I'm like, I could do that. And, it was also a job to where I can help others. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
originally why I signed up to be a nurse. And so that's kind of where the story actually starts to take a change. Um, I ended up getting notified that we were going to Germany. So they took me out of the scout platoon at that time because of the issues I was having at the hospital. Um, they put me in the training room, so I was working with a first sergeant commander. That was my first line leadership. And then for the career counselor, so I had to get a certificate while we were deployed. And then they told me I had to get a promotable status because I was an E5 and I needed to be an E5 promotable. And to get that status, I had to wait 9 months. Coincidentally, the deployment was about 9 months. So I'm like, cool, by the time I get done with this deployment, I can go to this class, I can submit my pack, and I'll be off. And, I can try to fix some things in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so ended up going through that deployment in Germany. And then towards the end of that deployment, um, I was I got to see who was on the promotion list that month because that was part of my job as submitting paperwork for the first sergeant commander. And so I saw my name, and then there's an X next to my name. And so go to my first sergeant. I'm like, hey, first sergeant, we've been talking about this for like 9 months. We were getting ready to submit the packet. Everyone was in support of it, to include, the commander, the first sergeant, and the career counselor. They all wanted me to do it. And then he's like, yeah, so we'll talk about that. Went to the next room, and he's like, hey, because you've been out of the scout platoon for a year, I'm not going to send you to the board. You need to go back to the scout platoon. And I'm like, hey, first sergeant, I'm not trying to be a scout anymore. I'm trying to leave the field. And he's like, I understand that, but you don't have your time, so I'm not going to count it. And so this entire time while I'm deployed, um, didn't count for anything. And so at this point, I'm pretty frustrated at this point because now I have to go back to the scout platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that was happening in Germany was that while in Germany, we're kind of like in close quarters, and so we're all bonding together. The thing with me was that, even though I didn't have like any of the dating websites at the time, I ended up reinstalling them because I'm like, everyone's going to go back home. They're going to see their family. They're going to see their friends, and I'm going to go home alone. So I ended up downloading all the dating websites again. I start getting hooked back into that again. And so I find myself in almost a similar situation where I'm like, I'm going back to the scout platoon. I got the dating apps re-downloaded. I'm in full desperation mode again. And then we get back to Germany. I go to the scout platoon, and I actually ended up not staying there long. So our career counselor was getting ready to head to his next duty station. And I'm like, what do I got to do to get out of here, out of this scout platoon, and get my career counselor packet going? So like, even though I got rejected, I still kept going towards it. He's
Hmm.
like, yeah, they have this retention NCO of the year board. If you go to that and pass it, that's like a guarantee you'll get your slot. So I went to that board. Out of the entire division of people, I was the only retention NCO to show up that year. So all I had to
Oh,
do was, not make a fool of
show
myself.
up. Yeah.
Yep, I
But
had to
what did
show
they,
up. I stood
what
a
did that look
gate.
like? They ask you questions? What is that?
Yeah, so at the time there was like, I think it was like a this was during COVID, so normally like you do a PT test, normally it's like a
Hmm.
2 3 day event,
Uh,
to where it's like broken up. I think this one there was only like a two-part. There's like a test, and then there was also a actual board to where I have to get up in dress uniform, and then I have to go in front of like other sergeant majors of the field, and they determine if I pass or not. Um, so I went there because I was the only retention NCO. They actually liked it because it showed like out of 1,000 people, I was the only one to show up. So they're like, good on you for showing like initiation. So that helped me.
hmm.
And then when I actually went through the board, they're like, hey, you ended up getting some of the questions over the actual counselors who actually that was their job.
Wow.
So I actually ended up doing good. So that was like a very core memory. Um, and then on top of that, so during the dating websites, I had to move off post. Army wasn't paying me right for like 2 3 months, so I had like $0 left in my bank. I had like $5 left in my bank because I was getting paid wrong, and that actually helped me get off the dating websites as well because I'm like, okay, I can't have all this premium stuff or anything like that. I'm about to go in debt. Um, so I got rid of those. I got rid of the premiums. I still had like the dating websites just in case I got like a match or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And what ended up happening there, I got a match one day, and it was almost exactly like the situation of the age scam that happened like 2 years prior to that. And so I recognized the signs. And so I played it out a little bit. And so, they sent me a picture. I'm like, hey, I'm going to block you now. Don't talk to me. I want nothing to do with this. And so the next morning, they pose as a detective, and they're like, hey, this person's in the hospital. And, right away, this is clicking. I'm like, hold up. This is the same exact situation from like a year ago. And then I'm very hesitant. My heart's beating at this point. I'm red, but I listen to the detective. I talk to him a little bit. And then it gets to the point to where I'm like identifying all these signs. And one of the big telltales, besides like the other two parts I already knew about and how it was identical, was that the detective asked me for my address so they could come arrest me.
Oh,
And so I
jeez.
was like, hold up. If you're a detective, you already have my address and you can come pick me up. And so I went
Yeah.
on for about like 5 10 minutes. And then I'm like, at the end of the call, I'm like, hey, I know this is a scam. I've been in this situation before. You call me again, I'm going to call a real detective and we're going to get a real investigation started. Never called me back. And so I killed like two birds with one stone. And then I ended up going to the career counselor course towards the end of that year, passed the course. And then once I kind of like passed that course in 2022, I'm like, okay, maybe I have a story to tell now because I just went through like 18, 22 years of like hell and I just like escaped it. And so by that time, I had created an entirely new character because, I was a quiet person. I didn't have like too many friends. I didn't talk to people. And so to become a career counselor, I had to do like a full 360. So I had to be an advocate for the army because I hated the army when I went to the hospital. I had to start talking to people, so I had to start liking them again. And then I also had to convince them, hey, the army's not so bad after all the things that just happened in my life. Um,
Yeah. So you basically reinvented yourself.
yeah,
Literally. Yeah. Yeah.
yep. And I was like an introvert who didn't talk to anyone, so I had to go up to like complete strangers. I'm like, hey, you want to talk about your military career? And so it's like, but no one knew my stories or anything like that. I would just go to talk to them, and then So in 2022, when I passed that class, I'm like, okay, I have a story to tell. I didn't write it down or anything like that. I kind of kept it in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, we escaped this. We turned life around. Let me see how the next, couple years go. Um, I went to Fort Campbell for a career counselor. I'm still there. I do ETS in like a week or two. So that's pretty cool. I'll have 10 years of service.
Awesome.
Throughout that time
Congratulations.
there, there's also some good events. I made it like a good reputation. Um, and then eventually, it was in late 2024, I started putting down my story into a PowerPoint. Um, I wanted to present it, so I presented it to my coworkers. They liked the idea and liked the story, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, if you're ready to tell the story, go tell it." Um, and then I ended up going to MRT, which is Master Resilience Trader. They don't have that course anymore. Now it's Ready and Resilient is the new name of it. But essentially, it tells you how to have like a resilient mind and stuff like that. And so,
Oh,
kind
love it.
of, I'm like, hold up, I already have a resilient life. I'm already kind of changing my mind. Let me go pick up some additional tools.
Uh-huh.
And my boss suggested it because of based on my PowerPoint. He's like, hey, you would be really good at this. So I go do that, and then our command career counselor at the time was asking us, the other career counselors, to present training to each other. And so I was like, okay, I can do an MRT class. I just got done with MRT. So like, hey, good idea. I ended up not sending them to MRT, but I ended up sending them the original PowerPoint I made before I went to MRT, the one that tells the story of me, my mother, and my father. And they're like, hey, this is in our MRT. So I got rejected. And then once that got rejected, I got notified that I was going to go to a deployment on Kuwait.
Oh, jeez.
Um,
Wow.
and so once that happened, I went on the deployment, and I'm like, I really wanted to tell the story at that point because I was already working on it. And so I'm like, I'm not going to just make this a PowerPoint. I'm going to turn this into a book. So I started writing the book in 2025. About 10 pages into that book, I decide that I'm like, okay, I'm going to finish this book before the end of deployment, and then I'm going to leave the army after this to go pursue this book, and that's kind of in the process that I'm in right now. Um, but during that deployment, one of the things that happened was before I locked the manuscript in to for the publishers, I started reforming that original PowerPoint that got rejected. I presented it to my command sergeant major at the time because career counselors we work at the battalion level. I'm like, hey, he wanted me to do some form of like NCO training. So I'm like, they didn't know it at the time, but I was like, hey, sergeant major, I'm writing a book that's about to get published. I want to do this PowerPoint. I want to get this out and start talking to it. It was like a suicidal awareness PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to do it in front of like 10, 20 people for like the new NCOs and stuff like that. Um, and it ended up not happening right away. It ended up getting delayed because I think he wanted me to do something different. So he wanted the PowerPoint, but what ended up happening is instead of doing it to 20 people, he wanted it done to the entire battalion.
Wow. Oh.
So we ended up doing the training at the theater, and that was about like 300 people.
Mhm.
So it actually got a lot of really good feedback, a lot of really good responses. They're like, "Hey, thank you for telling this story. It was really brave." And then I even had some people. They're like, "Hey, I've gone through similar experiences. Thank you for telling and speaking up." And that's kind of when I knew I'm like, okay, in my situation, I was never alone. It's just no one wants to tell this type of story. No one wants to be the first person to be this vulnerable. And so everyone wanted to hear the story. It's just no one wanted to tell it.
To tell
And
it,
so
right?
that really helped me. And I ended up adding that chapter before we locked it in. And then after we locked the book in, I ended up going back to Fort Campbell. I showed them, so the people who originally rejected the PowerPoint, I showed them the new PowerPoint, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, we would love to have this." So I ended up going to full 360 to where it got rejected, and like a year later, revamped it, and everyone liked it.
Incredible. And now you're encouraging others, and yeah, you took that step, and yeah, maybe other people see it, maybe they'll be more likely to share and speak out, and you know and get some help. There's all different levels where you're helping people by sharing a story, and yep, and your book is answering the hard questions. Let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book. That is such a perfect title, and So, uh, what do you think of like answering the hard questions really means?
Yeah, so answering the hard questions is a subtitle, and then let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book. That's more of like a subtitle, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also chapter one, and then it's also at the end of the book. So I actually turn that into an actual
Oh,
story, not just like a
incredible.
line.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite parts of the book as well because it's actually a really good one. But answering the hard questions was actually what I did when I got out of the hospital. The first question I asked myself was like, do I want to die? So before I went to the hospital, when I got out of the hospital, I'm like, okay, what would make me happy again after I heard that happiness quote? And so that led me to becoming a career counselor. And so they get to actually, go on the journey and, answer the questions as they're reading the book. And that's what it's about. It's finding the questions that I found in my life. And then I gave those back to the audience while also telling my story, like a memoir portion, and then also talking to the audience, telling them, which is like shorter segments, like flashbacks of my life, or like sometimes it's like poetry, stuff like that. Um, so there's a lot of different concepts in the book and stuff like that. And then let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book, to run that one down. So the original title of that was The Untold Consequences of Suicide. Sounded a little more grim. And the other line sounded a little bit better, a little more poetic.
Okay.
But essentially, what that actually means to me, it's like, imagine you're reading my book and you're reading this book because you're looking for that connection, right? You're on your own journey to hell. Um, and so you get to my point to where I'm getting blackmailed several times. You go to turn the book and you discover the page is blank. You're like, okay, it's the end of the chapter. You turn the page again, it's blank, it's blank. And so half the page is blank. And so at that moment, you realize it's not the end of the chapter, it's the end of the book. And you leave the reader with no hope, no redemption, no second chance. So by ending your story early, you take hope from everyone else. And so that's what let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book stands for.
Wow, what an incredible analogy. I never heard that before. That I love
Yep.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, man, what a journey you've been on from the beginnings, and now you're gonna be so what's gonna be next for you? You're gonna be doing a lot of speaking and more books coming out. I know
Yeah.
you just released this one.
So it just released March 31st. It's been going well so far. Still got to work out like sales and getting the story out there. So that's kind of what I've been working on with the podcasting. I think
Hmm.
this is like my sixth or seventh one. So right now I'm just trying to spread it, to different people. Everyone's liked the story so far. Um, I don't mind doing speaking as well because I've done it for like training stuff like that. Um, I'm still continuing to write, so I just came up with the new title of the next book, which is Answering the Call, a continuation of Faith and Questioning, to where people kind of see me go back to like religion, my religious roots, stuff like that. Because I talk about it a little bit about in the first book, but it wasn't the, I guess, core concept. It was something that um, I contemplating during the book, and that's kind of where you get that imagery on the front cover of like an angel and a demon. Um, and so that's where that actually comes back. It comes from like a chapter called "Going to War with God," where I talk about my early, church struggle. And so now the next book is going to be more based on like faith, more like based on like the Bible stuff like that. And then I'm trying to see what I can keep from my original book and bring over to my faith and stuff like that. So that's kind of what the second book is going to be about. I'm about like 50 pages in, so still going pretty strong.
Hmm.
And then I'm also seeing where this first book goes with the podcasting, seeing where that takes me.
Okay, great. Yeah, yeah, I love that concept too, and tying it in, especially with your faith and everything. So, wow, what an incredible story. And yeah, I'm sure you touched a lot of people, helping a lot of people out. Yeah, just being brave and speaking out, and because you're not the only one going through this, but and this lets other people know that they're not alone. You're not alone when going through all these struggles, and we're all here to help each other. So, so thank you so much for speaking out like that. Um, but we can end this on a fun note. This should be interesting because this is what I ask all the guests. But probably young enough to be a lot of a kid to a lot of us, but we'll see how this goes. Who are some of your favorite music artists? I was say like growing up and listen to now.
So, so I actually talk about it in the book, but I was pretty heavy into the metal and punk scene.
Mm-hmm.
The one I mentioned in the book was Marilyn Manson, which is like the Antichrist superstar. And so that's where my some of my church struggle comes from because I needed to let the anger out somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And I actually talk about that experience. So it's ironic because that is in the book, to where people get that experience, and then they can see, where I was pretty atheist, I was like anti-religious, and then and by the end of the book, I talk about like faith over like 100 times in the book. Um, so complete 360 on that one as well.
Love it. All right, and then yeah, this is gonna date us all. Who were some of your celebrity crushes growing up?
Um, I think the one my dad used to pick on me about was like Angelina Jolie, and then
Okay.
Hannah Montana used to pick up on me, which is like Miley Cyrus. So
Hmm.
those might have been two.
Oh, yeah, those popular ones. Yeah. Awesome. All right, and then you want to tell people where they can find you, how they can get your book?
Yeah. So the book itself can be found on like Amazon. It's also like on Goodreads. It's also on like Barnes and Noble online, stuff like that. So I think a lot of bookstores have it. They might not have it on the shelves. Mostly it's like online right now. But they can order it through ebook. They can order it through like paperback or hardcover. So it's in all three versions. No audiobook yet. I have to wait for a market to develop before I invest any more money into that aspect.
Hmm.
But they could also find it like on iBook, Kodobo, Kindle, stuff like that. As far as finding me, they could. My name is Devin Fish. They can pretty much look me up on Facebook. I'm a pretty easy guy to find. I was going to say I had an Instagram and a Threads. Unfortunately, I think I got a little too many bots on there, so I'm like ended up deleting that last week.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're like book influencers. So
Uh,
I found like another scam section.
Scammer.
So maybe that'll make it into the second book. And so I'm like, all right, let me delete this account because I'm not liking the direction this is going. Um,
Yep.
and so, but besides that, I also have like Gmail and stuff like that I don't mind giving out.
Okay. Yeah, I could put links in the show notes and everything. Yeah, yeah. I get like a lot of those private messages. I get some like a lot of junk email too that
Mhm.
they're gonna promote my book. That my book is so great, but I didn't publish anything yet. I just finished the first draft last week, and yet
Mhm.
they love my book. So yeah,
Yeah.
the scams are everything. So be on the lookout. Oh, so thank you so much, Devin. Thank you for sharing your story. It's incredible, and yeah, I know people really get a lot out of it, and you inspire them. You really made a huge turnaround. So yeah, if you think you had it bad, then you can look to Devin. He'll yeah, if you can do it, then yeah. There's hope. As long as there's breath, there's hope. So I'm glad you really doing awesome now. So, yeah, so thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for listening.
Again, thanks. I was gonna say, yeah, thanks for having me. I would say one thing I would leave people with, because you kind of hit on it. But by continuing to tell our stories, not just mine, but yours as well, we can take the impossible out of someone else's story.
Yep. So, all right. Thank you, and thank you everybody, and we'll see you next time.